She was 20 and she had nowhere left to go. Not the kind of nowhere that sounds dramatic in a story, but the kind that feels quiet and final when the door closes behind you and no one calls you back. She had $29 in her pocket and a phone that was about to stop working. And with almost all of it, she bought something no one else wanted. A collapsing fishing dock shack at the edge of a lake that most maps did not bother to name. The wood was soft with age. The roof leaned like it was tired. And somewhere beneath those old planks, hidden for longer than she had been alive, something was waiting. Something she was never meant to find. Before we continue, if stories like this mean something to you, hit subscribe and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel. Her name was Lila Hart. She had grown up in a small riverside town where mornings smelled like wet soil and old wood. Her mother worked long shifts at a diner by the highway, and her father had left when she was 8, taking nothing but his tools and a silence that never really went away. Lila learned early how to stay quiet, how to not ask for too much, how to sit by the window and watch the river move like it knew exactly where it was going. The only person who ever seemed to understand her without asking questions was her grandfather. He lived in a narrow house by the edge of the same river, a place filled with old clocks that ticked in uneven rhythms. He never spoke much, but he always noticed things. The way a hinge sounded different when it was about to break. The way wood changed color before it gave in to water. The way silence could mean more than words if you listened carefully. He used to take her down to the docks when she was little. Not the busy ones, the quiet ones that fishermen stopped using years ago. He would sit there for hours, not fishing, just watching the water move under the planks. Once, when she was 10, she asked him what he was looking for. He did not answer right away. He just tapped the wood gently with his knuckles and said that sometimes the most important things are hidden where people stop looking. She did not understand it then. She just remembered it. He died when she was 16. No long goodbye. Just a morning that felt heavier than usual and a house that suddenly sounded too quiet without the ticking. After that, things got harder. Her mother worked more. Lila worked after school. By 19, she had dropped out of college because she could not afford it anymore. By 20, the argument that had been building for years finally broke. Words were said that could not be taken back, and that was how she ended up standing outside with a backpack and nowhere to go. For a week, she moved between cheap rooms and borrowed couches. Then the money started to run out. The phone died. The options got smaller. She found the listing late at night on a public notice board at the back of a small grocery store. A county sale. Abandoned properties. Most of them were farmland or broken sheds no one wanted. And then there was the dock shack. $1. The photo was blurry. Just a gray shape over water. Something about it pulled at her in a way she could not explain. The next morning, she took a bus as far as it would go. Then she walked. The road narrowed into gravel, then into dirt, then into something that barely counted as a path. Trees closed in on both sides, tall and quiet. The air smelled like pine and damp leaves. It felt like stepping out of the world she knew and into something slower. When she reached the lake, it was almost evening. The water stretched out wide and still, reflecting a sky that was turning soft gold. And there it was, the dock. It reached into the lake like a forgotten thought. The shack at the end leaned slightly to one side, its paint long gone, its boards dark with years of rain and sun. No footprints, no voices, just wind moving across the surface of the water. She stood there for a long time before stepping onto the dock. Each step made a soft, hollow sound. The wood felt fragile, but it held. Inside the shack, there was almost nothing. A broken chair, a rusted hook on the wall, a small window clouded with dirt. It smelled like old water and time. It should have felt empty, but it did not. There was a weight in the silence, something just beneath it. She stayed the first night sitting against the wall, wrapped in her jacket, listening to the water move under the planks. It was not loud, just a slow, steady rhythm, like breathing. The next morning, she started cleaning. Not because she had a plan, just because it felt like the only thing she could do. She swept out the dust, cleared the broken pieces, let light in through the window. And then she noticed it. A section of the floor near the back felt different. The boards were slightly darker, worn in a way that did not match the rest. She stepped on it. It gave just a little. Her heart slowed. She knelt down and pressed her hand against the wood. It was colder there, solid, but not completely fixed, like it had been moved before. She sat back for a moment, not touching it, just looking. Why would someone hide something here? Who would come this far just to leave something behind? She did not open it that day. Instead, she spent the afternoon sitting at the edge of the dock, feet hanging above the water, watching the light shift across the lake, the same way her grandfather used to. That night, the thought stayed with her, quiet, steady. The next morning, she tried again. It took time. The wood had settled into place over the years. She found a loose nail and used it to pry gently at the edge. The board lifted with a soft, reluctant sound. Underneath was darkness, and something wrapped in cloth. Her hands trembled as she reached in and pulled it out. It was heavier than she expected. She sat on the floor and unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a small wooden box. Old, but carefully made. The kind of thing someone builds to last. She opened it. Inside were 3 things. A worn notebook. The pages yellowed, filled with neat handwriting that shifted slightly over time. Notes about the lake. Weather patterns. Fish movement. Small observations that felt too careful to be random. A small tin with coins. Not a fortune, but enough to matter to someone who had almost nothing. And a folded piece of paper. She held the paper for a long time before opening it. The handwriting was slower here, less steady. It spoke of a man who had built the shack decades ago, a fisherman who had lost his family in a winter that came too hard and stayed too long. He wrote about the silence that followed, about how the lake became the only place that made sense after that. He wrote that he had hidden these things not because they were valuable, but because they were the only proof that he had been there, that he had watched, that he had understood something about the world, even if no one else ever knew. And then, at the end, he wrote that if someone ever found this, it meant they had stayed long enough to notice what others did not. That they were the kind of person who watched. Lila read it twice, then again. Her chest felt tight, but not in a painful way. In a way that felt like something inside her was slowly finding its place. She looked around the shack, at the worn boards, the quiet lake, the space that had once held someone else's life. It did not feel abandoned anymore. It felt shared. In the weeks that followed, she stayed. She used the coins carefully, bought basic supplies, fixed what she could, learned how to patch wood, how to seal small leaks, how to live slowly. People from a nearby town began to notice. At first, they just watched from a distance. Then one day, an older man stopped at the edge of the dock and asked if she needed help with the roof. She said yes. It started like that. Small. A conversation. A tool borrowed. A meal shared. She began writing in the notebook. At first, just small notes. The way the light hit the water at different times. The sound of wind before a storm. Things her grandfather would have noticed. Over time, the pages filled. She was still not rich, still not certain about the future, but she was no longer lost. The shack changed slowly, not into something new, but into something alive again. On a quiet evening, months later, she sat at the edge of the dock, watching the sun lower into the water. The same golden light, the same silence. She thought about the man who had left the box, about her grandfather, about the way some lives touch without ever meeting, and she understood something she had not before. that not everything lost is meant to be gone forever. Some things wait. They wait for the right person, the one who will notice, the one who will stay long enough to understand. She had come there with nothing, but she had found something that could not be measured. If this story stayed with you, take a moment to subscribe and become part of this journey with us. And tell us in the comments, have you ever found something in a place where no one else was looking? Until the next story, take care of yourself and keep noticing the quiet things around you.